All right, let's jump into this whole benchmarking thing for databases in the cloud. Really important stuff, especially if you're dealing with data in the cloud. It's all about squeezing every ounce of performance out of your database up there.
Yeah, think of it like a stress test. We're going to see if your database can handle the heat.
So we've got 3 main points to cover. First up, picking the right image. And it's not as simple as just grabbing the biggest, baddest virtual machine out there.
Right, different images are built for different tasks.
Can you give us an example? Like, how do you actually match an image type to what your database needs?
Sure. Let's say you've got a busy e-commerce site, tons of transactions flying around. You'd want a compute-optimized image for that. Something built for speed, lots of transactions happening fast. Amazon C5 instances are a good example.
Makes sense. And then we have the size of the image, right?
Oh, yeah. This is crucial. Too small, and your database is going to be choking. Too big, and you're just throwing money away on resources you don't need. Finding the right balance is key.
So how do we figure out the right size?
You got to really understand your database's workload. How much data are you dealing with? How many users are going to be hitting it at once? What kind of queries are you running? All this plays into figuring out the perfect size.
So for a huge database with tons of users, you probably need a bigger image, more horsepower, and RAM, right?
Exactly. And Amazon, for example, they offer a whole bunch of sizes within each image type. They're M4 images. They go from M4.large, which is 2 virtual CPUs and 8 gigs of RAM, all the way up to M4.16x large. That's a whopping 64 virtual CPUs and 256 gigs of RAM.
Whoa, that's a pretty big range.
Yeah.
But even if you've got the right image type and size, there's more to think about, isn't there?
Yep. We got to talk about regions and availability zones. This is where location actually starts mattering in the cloud.
Location in the cloud, why does that matter? It's all online, right?
Well, a region is basically like a neighborhood. It's a cluster of data centers that are all pretty close to each other. Amazon and Azure, they have these spread out strategically all over the world. And the reason location matters is because of latency.
Latency, that delay in data transfer. How does that mess with database performance?
Latency can absolutely kill your database's performance, especially if your applications are heavily reliant on it. Imagine someone in India trying to access a database all the way over in the US. There's going to be a delay, like trying to have a conversation with someone on the other side of the world.
So choosing a region that's closer to your users can really speed things up.
Exactly. Especially for applications that depend heavily on the database, that difference in milliseconds makes a world of difference.
So the right region makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
But what about availability zones? What are those all about?
Availability zones are like your safety net. Think of them as separate setups within a region. Each one has its own power and networking. So if one zone goes down, your app can keep running in another one. It's all about redundancy, making sure your database is always there when you need it.
So it's kind of like having a backup generator. If the power goes out, you're not left in the dark.
That's a great way to put it. They make sure your database is resilient and can handle those unexpected hiccups.
Okay, we've covered image selection and why location matters in the cloud. What's next?
Next up, we got to talk about realistic testing. This is something that a lot of people overlook.
So we can't just pick a configuration and cross our fingers.
Definitely not. You need to test your database with a workload that actually mirrors what's going to be happening in the real world. That means using the same image type, size, and region that you're going to be using when your database is live.
So no using smaller, cheaper images just for testing then?
Nope. Those results won't tell you the whole story. You could run into problems down the line. Imagine training for a marathon by just jogging around your block. It's not going to cut it.
So how do we go about setting up a realistic testing environment?
First, you need to figure out what your workload actually looks like. What are the most common things your database is going to be doing? How many users are you expecting? How much data are they going to be accessing?
This is where really understanding your application and how it uses the database comes in, right?
Absolutely. You got to know how those two interact. Once you have a handle on your workload, you can start building your test data.
And this test data, should it be the same as the data that's going to be in the live database?
Ideally, yes. The closer it is to your real data, the more accurate your testing results are going to be.
But what if we're working with sensitive data? We can't just copy that over to a test environment.
You're right. In those cases, you can use techniques to mask the sensitive data while keeping the structure and relationships within the data intact.
So it's kind of like creating a dummy version of our data. It looks and feels real, but doesn't actually contain any sensitive information. So once we have our workload figured out and our test data ready, what's next?
Next, you need to choose your benchmarking tools. There are tons of options out there, both open source and commercial.
What are some things to keep in mind when choosing a tool?
It really depends on what you need. Some tools are designed for specific database platforms, while others are more general. Think about how automated it is, the reporting features, and of course, the cost.
So there's no one-size-fits-all solution.
Not really. Do your research and pick the tool that fits your needs. Once you've got your tool, it's time to set up your test environment.
Any best practices for setting that up?
Well, like we talked about earlier, use the same image type and size that you're going to be using in production. Choose the same region and availability zone, too.
So basically, we're trying to create a mirror image of our live environment.
As close as possible, yeah. And make sure your test environment is completely separate from your live environment. This prevents your tests from messing with your live database.
We don't want our tests accidentally causing problems in the real world.
Exactly. Treat your test environment with the same care you treat your live environment. Keep it secure and keep an eye on it.
So it's like having a separate lab where we can experiment without risking our live systems.
Yep.
Once our environment is all set up, are there any common pitfalls to avoid when we actually run the tests?
One mistake people make is not running the tests long enough. Benchmarking takes time. You need to run your tests for a decent amount of time to get reliable results.
How long is long enough?
It really depends on your workload and how complex your tests are, but generally shoot for at least a few hours, if not a full day or even longer.
I bet monitoring those tests is pretty important too.
Yeah, definitely keep a close eye on things like CPU usage, memory consumption, and what's happening with your disks. This helps you spot any bottlenecks or performance issues that might pop up.
It's like checking the vital signs of a patient, making sure the database is healthy.
Exactly. And if you run into any problems, have a plan for troubleshooting and fixing them.
So it's not just about running the tests, but about analyzing the results and making changes based on what we learn.
Exactly. Benchmarking is an iterative process. You'll probably need to run multiple tests, adjust your configurations, and really fine-tune things to squeeze out the best performance.
Like fine-tuning a race car, getting the most out of the engine.
That's a great analogy. It's all about getting your database in tip-top shape to handle the demands of the cloud.
Speaking of the cloud, are there any unique challenges when it comes to benchmarking in that environment?
Yeah, there are a few. One is that the cloud is constantly changing. New services and features are always being released, which makes it hard to keep your tests up to date.
So it's kind of like aiming at a moving target.
Yeah, in a way, you got to be flexible and adjust your approach as the cloud changes. Another challenge is that the cloud can sometimes feel like a black box. You don't always have a clear view of what's going on under the hood.
How does that limited visibility affect benchmarking?
It can make it tricky to pinpoint the root cause of performance problems. You might see things slowing down, but you're not sure if it's your database configuration or some... You got it. You have to rely on the tools and information your cloud provider gives you to understand how your database and the cloud infrastructure are behaving.
That makes sense. So what are some tips for successfully benchmarking in the cloud?
First, pick the right cloud provider. Not all of them are created equal when it comes to benchmarking tools and support.
So doing some research on different providers and their capabilities is important.
Definitely. You also want to understand their pricing model. Benchmarking can use a lot of resources, and you don't want to get hit with a surprise bill.
That's a good point. Got to keep that benchmarking budget under control.
For sure. Planning carefully and setting spending limits is key. Another tip is to tap into the expertise of your cloud provider. Most of them offer professional services that can help you with benchmarking and getting the most out of your performance.
So it's like having a personal trainer for our cloud database.
Exactly. They can provide valuable insights and help you make the most of your benchmarking efforts.
Okay, we've covered a lot of ground today. Let's recap some key points for everyone listening.
Sure. When it comes to benchmarking for the public cloud, choosing the right image type and size is crucial. You need to understand how regions and availability zones can impact performance and make sure you're testing with realistic scenarios that mirror your actual environment. Don't cut corners on testing. It's your insurance policy for smooth database performance in the cloud.
And remember, the cloud is always evolving. Stay up to date on new services and features that could affect your database's performance. Use those monitoring tools your provider offers, and don't be afraid to reach out to the experts if you need help. Benchmarking is an ongoing process, so be ready to adapt and refine your approach as you go.
You know, it's funny. It really hits me now that picking the right image and, figuring out those regions and really doing the testing, it's a lot more to think about than just spinning up a database on a server somewhere in your basement.
It definitely is.
Yeah.
Yeah, the cloud's great. It gives you a ton of flexibility, a ton of power, but it also means you really got to understand how all these different pieces work together and how they affect your database performance.
And staying ahead of the game, that's going to be super important, right? The cloud's always changing. There are new services and features popping up left and right.
Oh, absolutely. What works best today might be totally outdated tomorrow. So keeping up with the latest cloud trends and constantly tweaking your benchmarking strategies, that's key. So it's not a set it and forget it kind of thing.
Right.
It's about always optimizing.
Exactly. Think of it like you're partnering with your cloud provider. They're always coming up with new stuff. And you need to take advantage of those innovations to keep your database running at its best.
This has been a really eye-opening look at benchmarking in the cloud. I feel like I've learned a ton.
I'm glad to hear that. It's definitely a complex topic.
Yeah.
But understanding the basics can make a huge difference in how your database performs.
Before we wrap up, I'm curious. What's one thing you wish more people understood about benchmarking in the cloud?
That's a great question. I think the biggest misconception is that benchmarking is a one-and-done thing. People often think of it as a box to check before they go live. But it's really an ongoing process. Your workload's going to change. New technologies are going to come out. Your cloud provider's going to push updates. You need to be ready to revisit your benchmarks, adapt your testing, and always be on the lookout for new tools and techniques. That's how you keep your database running smoothly in the cloud.
That's a fantastic point to remember. It's not a destination. It's a journey. Benchmarking is a constant feedback loop that helps you adapt and optimize as the cloud changes.
Exactly. You got to embrace that dynamic nature of the cloud and use benchmarking as your roadmap to navigate all the twists and turns of database performance.
Well said. Thanks again for joining us. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
The pleasure was all mine. I hope you found it helpful.
And to everyone listening, thanks for joining us on the Deep Dive. If you enjoy this deep dive, hit that like button, share it with your friends, and subscribe for more deep dives into all things tech. Until next time, keep exploring and stay curious. It's really amazing when you think about it. Picking the right image and then figuring out regions and then the testing. It's so much more than just setting up a database on a server somewhere.
Oh, it is. It really is. The cloud is fantastic, so flexible, so powerful. But to get it right, you have to understand how all these different parts work together, how they affect your database performance.
Yeah. And staying ahead of the curve is so important, right? The cloud is constantly changing new services and features all the time.
Absolutely. You know, it's the best way to do things today could be completely obsolete tomorrow. Keeping up with the latest trends, always refining your benchmarking strategies, it's crucial.
So it's definitely not set it and forget it. It's all about continuous optimization.
Exactly. It's like a partnership you have with your cloud provider. They're always innovating, and you need to stay on top of that to keep your database performing at its peak.
You know, this deep dive into benchmarking for the cloud has been incredible.
Right.
I feel like I have a much deeper understanding of what goes into it.
That's great to hear. I know it can be complex, but understanding the basics makes a huge difference for your database performance.
Before we go, is there one thing you wish more people understood about benchmarking in the cloud?
That's a really good question. I think the biggest misconception is that benchmarking is just a one-time thing. You know, something you do once and then you're done. People treat it like a box to check off before they launch. But benchmarking, it's an ongoing process. Your workload's going to change. New technologies are going to come out. Your cloud provider will release updates. You have to be ready to go back to your benchmarks.
Yep.
Adapt your testing. Always be curious about new tools and techniques. That's how you keep that database running smoothly.
It's such a good point. It's not a destination. It's a journey.
Yeah.
Benchmarking is that constant feedback loop that helps you adapt and optimize as the cloud evolves.
Exactly. You got to embrace how dynamic the cloud is. Use benchmarking as your guide as you navigate all the changes in database performance.
Well said. Thanks so much for joining us. It's been a pleasure.
The pleasure was all mine. I hope you found it valuable.
And to everyone listening, thanks for joining us on the Deep Dive. If you enjoyed this exploration, hit that like button, share it with your friends, and subscribe for more deep dives into the world of technology. Until next time, keep exploring and stay curious.